Could you talk about the main festivals, that is Hindu religious festival, which are majority, how they are converted into a mainstream level, so-called secular festivals, example like Diwali, Durga Puja, Onam, like that. Could you just drop your comment?
Diwali and Holi are slightly different from festivals like Durga Puja, and I'm not very clear about the history of Onam. I mean, that you have got much more on Dalit camera on Onam and the history of Onam than I would know. But there's a whole set of festivals which emerged in the late 19th century, early 20th century, mainly late 19th century, like Durga Puja, like Ganesh Chatrudi, which is coming in a few days' time, and which were basically innovations, done by people very deliberately, very consciously, to further a certain national project. And so, for example, if you look at Ganesh Chaturthi or Durga Puja, in these were festivals which were done inside the house of prominent people, either the landlord or the main priest of a temple in a particular temple. And there were very particular caste rules and other rules of who will go where. So if a zamindar is organizing a puja, that puja would be attended by people who belong to that zamindar and his family, and who would come there, would have certain social relations with that zamindar. But what happened in the late 19th century was that young men in the city of Calcutta, mainly in the city of Calcutta, decided that Durga Puja should not be only linked to such what they termed restrictive, feudal or conservative social modes, and that it should be open for all. And in these earlier forms, the way the puja was done was a very particular caste rules: who can sit where, who can eat where, things of that sort. Who will do the puja, who will go stand how close to the deity, and things like that. But in the late 19th century, what happened was, the idea was we would do it publicly through public subscription, and everybody was supposed to be part of it. So this thing in Bengal we started was Sarvajanik, everybody is part of it. Sarvajanin in Hindi, that everybody comes in. And the idea of everybody was particularly that these caste differences will not be part of it. These various differences of, this household does it, that priest does it, this temple does it, that will go, and you will have a open thing where anybody can enter and anyone can participate. And the idea of this was something very particularly late 19th century. So, for example, if you see Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's novel Anandamath, which is a very well-known example, there is this whole thing of all the sannyasis getting together to pray in the forest, but all of them get together. And if you look at the structure of the prayer, it is very innovative for that time, and almost, what should one say, heretic to the standards of religion, because people, irrespective of caste, were getting there. Now when I say irrespective of caste, the thing is that theoretically it was for everybody, but obviously the line of demarcation was the clean castes and the not clean castes. So the non-clean castes were still assumed at that time wouldn't be there because they were not part of the public sphere, as it were. But it was a clean caste. But previous to that, even among the clean castes, even say within jatis who were Brahmins, there would be rules of social intercourse, who will deal with who will go where, who will meet whom, and then between Brahmins and other castes. So the whole idea was this thing of the clean caste. There will be one group, everyone comes together, and the way the puja was organized was to democratize it. So the idea was that people will subscribe. It is not that the zamindar or the big man in the village or in the locality would organize it from his wealth. But everybody will contribute. So if you can't contribute much, you will contribute less. Somebody might contribute more, and it will be pooled together. So nobody knows what is whose. Right? It is contributed. You take a public space and you erect a temporary temple and do this puja. So in that sense, there was an element of democratization of religion. What some theorists of the term they would use is secularization. Because in those contexts, the whole idea was certain caste rules were being broken, certain forms of religion were being broken, right? It was made open for everybody. But in the very moment in which it was being done, it was also other things were happening. So religion was moved from the private into the public sphere. Right? It became an assertion of the community defined in religious terms. So if you look at, for example, the Ganesh Chatrudi, which is coming in a few days' time, Durga Puja next one. If you look at Ganesh Chatrudi, it was very well documented that it was in the last decade of the 19th century that Tilak and others got together to organize this as a public festival. And in fact, the conservatives at that time in Maharashtra were aghast at this, that how can you do something like this? Like you're going around on the roads with Ganesh images, it's completely unacceptable. And the whole idea, it was very much a part of national assertion. Because the national community, the way it was imagined by a lot of people at that time, was along religious communities. And what is not said is that religious communities imagined themselves as certain castes. Right? So in Bengal, it was not called caste, it was called the Bhadralok. But if you look at the Bhadralok, they are completely from a few castes, the upper caste. Even the Shudra caste, whom we today call whether the intermediate castes or the OBCs, the Shudras were not counted. So in Bombay, I don't know the exact history, but I think, if I am not mistaken, that it was not only the Brahmins or the upper caste, others were also involved. And the whole idea was that using this religious occasion, we are going to go and put our flag in the public sphere, in the public space, on the roads, on the parks, right? And take over and assert ourselves. So the whole idea that people get together, there is, everybody sits together and eats and things like that. And everyone goes together in a procession and you shout and you assert yourself publicly, was very much a part of it. And if you notice that the people Tilak was targeting was to mobilize in this was surely Hindu, because only Hindus would come for this. But if you look at other attributes of the group, they were basically people who were the working class and the lower middle class as well. The lower professions. They might not be actual workers in the factories in Bombay, but people who weren't doing very well in struggling. And that is the social class that Tilak was trying to organize in this, unite in this, and raise demands. And the people who were raising these demands, let me rephrase, the people who were bringing about this public festivals, religious festivals, were also, if you notice, the first people who raised the demand of full independence from colonialism. So it was a very complex, complicated package which came together. Of course, over the 100 years, it has changed a lot. And it has now, in a sense, become much more of an assertion of public religion and public religiosity of the majority religion in India than anything else. So the issues of class get resolved in a certain way, where it's the dominant classes, right? The caste has always been there as a dominant caste. But also the question of nationalism and anti-colonialism, not so much nationalism, but anti-colonialism, has obviously now become something which is not relevant. So So that in a sense has changed. But I would like to add something here, that it is not that when this was coming up, this was not critiqued. So right from the beginning, for example, you had critiques of this. So you had a whole range of Hindu leaders who were conservative Hindu leaders, who are not radicals, who were saying that this is unacceptable, that you are raising social forces which you won't be able to handle. Right? These large number of people come out, you don't know what is happening. This is not the way religion is done. Now that was a conservative critique. But they were also pointing at some level to the possibilities of social tensions and social divisions that you create, which were not there. Right? Secondly, there was also a similar critique coming from people who were, for the want of a better word, you could say, on the left of this. So, in Maharashtra, people like Agarkar, for example. I'm not even talking of Phule and others. I'm just talking of from within the, the group in which Tilak was. Just say people like Agarkar. Or in Bengal, for example, Tagore becomes an important figure. So, for example, in 1905, when Bengal was partitioned and this whole Swadeshi movement emerged against that. Now, the Swadeshi movement was an expression against British colonialism and what colonialism was doing in India. But it was also very much a Hindu upper caste movement of a very small section. And one of the things they used in that was the Rakhi, Raksha Bandh. So what they did was, and this was in fact Tagore's idea initially, because Tagore was very much part of this movement at that time, that we will convert Raksha Bandhan traditionally is something very personal. It doesn't happen publicly. Right? The idea was of Raksha Bandhan is that within the family, brothers and sisters have this pact of brothers, defending their sisters, pledging to defend their sisters and all that. Now what Tagore said, and it's supposed to be this sisters tie the Rakhi on, the string on the brother's wrist, and brothers give a pledge to defend their sisters. So Tagore said that we will change this and make this into a public thing, like happened with Durga Pooja earlier, and had happened with just a few years previously to that with Ganesh Chatrudi. Tagore said that we will change that, and everybody, man, woman, right? A woman will tie a Rakhi to a woman, a man to a man, man to a woman. It's not about brother sister anymore. It is about fraternity, brotherhood. The ideal of fraternity. So, sort of using that form, in a sense, it was very creative. And he envisioned it in a sense where Hindus and Muslims would tie to each other. And brothers and sisters, husbands and wives could tie together. Fathers and children, could tie to each other. Anybody, everybody, to say that we are all one, we are all the same fraternity. There's this fraternalization, the idea of fraternalization. But the response that came from the Muslims, particularly in Bengal, but the way, particularly the Muslims, alerted Tagore to the fact that this is not going to happen, because this is, while there's a lot of creativity in it, and the idea of fraternalization and fraternity is excellent, but if you use this form of the Rakhi, which comes from a very particular Hindu usage tradition, then it will get misunderstood. It will in fact create more division. Right? So Tagore in fact became one of the first people to say this is wrong. And Tagore, for example, then among the big thinkers, if you look at in modern India, he came up with a trenchant critique of this. So 1905, when this happens, he's the one who proposes this, and he's the one who starts it off in 1905. But by 1908 or 9, he's already writing this novel Gora, which is a critique of this. And then a few years later comes Home and the World. And then later, in his essays on nationalism and others. And Tagore himself in Shantiniketan, for example, in his university, Vishwabharati, it's not that he stopped the worship or the Durga Puja or the Saraswati Puja or anything of that sort. But what he did was that he foregrounded festivals which are not religious, which are taken from the local agricultural calendar of the peasantry there. So Poush Mela, right? which happens I think in December. I don't remember exactly. So that happens. Then the Bengali New Year were things, though it was cultural, there were other issues there, but he made a conscious attempt to move out of religious imagery for that. But in Bengal, for example, and a lot of research by now has come on that, the anti-colonial movement or the national movement was very strongly in the hands of the Hindu upper caste. And the Durga Puja, primarily so, but others, Saraswati Puja is a big thing in Bengal, and not just in Bengal, but areas influenced by what was then the province of Bengal in British India, so Odisha, parts of Bihar, Jharkhand, Assam. Saraswati Puja is a big festival which happens sometime in early spring in those areas, February or so. So that became a big thing. Again, public festivals. You mentioned Diwali. Now, Diwali and Holi have a very different history, in the sense that they have been themselves public festivals much before the advent of the 19th